Hello, everyone, and welcome back into another edition of Inquirer Live at Game Day Central. Today, we are coming to you from the press box in Philadelphia, where in just a little bit, the undefeated Eagles will host the Jacksonville Jaguars and a familiar friend in Coach Doug Pederson. I am Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Josh Tolentino, and as always, I am joined by EJ Smith. Together, we are your co-hosts for Game Day Central. EJ, it is raining so much. It has been raining so much today. How are you doing? You staying dry over there?
I was about to say, I'm dry, and that's pretty much the best that you can hope for on a day like today. I always go back to the Forrest Gump quote. It's raining sideways at the link right now, so yeah, it's going to be an interesting day for sure.
Yeah, you and I got here over an hour ago, and it has not stopped raining here in South Philly again as the Eagles get ready to host the Jacksonville Jaguars, a very anticipated matchup. But before we get started, EJ, I want to remind everyone back home that no matter where they're tuning in, Game Day Central is the place to be. EJ, what is the best place where they can find us?
That's right, Josh. They can find us at inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. That's where, we're going to have our analysis during the game. We'll put our live comments and, what we're seeing out on the field in there. And, it's two-way conversation. We want you guys to join in and, let us know what you're thinking. Maybe let us know what you see on the broadcast. And we take some of our favorite comments each week from that site and we put them in a segment we call What You Said. It's my favorite segment. It's kind of where we get to respond to whatever's on your guys' mind. So, yeah, definitely make sure to join us over there.
All right, EJ, let's hop right into it, man. What is the latest with this team? I think we've got to start, as I mentioned earlier. Doug Pederson, the former Eagles coach, he makes his return today to Philadelphia. It is the first time for him being a coach of another team to make his return to Philly. He is the only coach in franchise history to bring this franchise a Super Bowl title. EJ, what kind of reception are you expecting today for Doug Pederson?
I think it'll be a mixed reception, right? I feel like, the championship and the good years will probably lead everyone to probably cheer him early on, but I could see some boos. I think that wouldn't surprise me if there was a tribute video. I'm not really like an expert on like stadium operations and stuff like that, but it feels like that's probably the type of reception that'll get. There will probably be an appreciation early for the good times, but then at some point it's going to be okay. This guy's the Jaguars head coach now. He's not on the friendly side anymore. So I that's my guess, but I could see it going the other way too. I could see a lot of boos. You know how Eagles fans can be. So
EJ, you covered the last year of Doug Pederson here in Philadelphia. Just, I guess, if you could rewind us back to that year. I mean, so much happened after the Super Bowl victory. Just, I guess, what are your, a personal question, but what are your favorite moments covering Doug?
yeah, I covered Doug in 2019 and 2020. So 2019, they had that late season run to get into the playoffs, and they sort of salvaged a rocky start to the year. And the memory I have of that season is just guys like Boston Scott and Greg Ward, a lot of practice squad call-ups kind of making it work, and Carson Wentz kind of being that special quarterback to kind of elevate the entire group. And I look back at those days because Boston Scott, back when I first started covering him, was like just a practice squad guy. Not a lot of people by his locker. He's kind of always in there. And now all of a sudden it's like, all right, this guy has become a commodity in the locker room. He's one of the veterans, kind of a leader on the team in a way. So that's what stands out about 2019 and 2020. It was the COVID year. It's definitely tough to connect with players, and 2020 was a really bad year for the Eagles. 4-11-1. Never forget the tie against the Bengals, and you'll never forget the Week 18 or the Week 17 loss where they pulled all the starters, much to the Giants' chagrin, and secured the sixth pick, which they traded back, and they got Devontae Smith with the 10th pick. And yeah, there's a lot that went into that game. Our colleague Jeff McLean wrote about that, and it's kind of something that played a huge part in where the Eagles are today. Making sure that they got that sixth pick. People didn't like it at the time, but in hindsight, it kind of worked out for the team. So
After ridding Doug Pederson from his position here with the Eagles, they replaced him with Nick Sirianni. Here, EJ Sirianni is in his second season. Last year, he led the Eagles to the NFC wildcard game. EJ, fast forward to now, the Eagles are 3-0, and they're welcoming back Doug Pederson here today. They're looking to continue their perfect streak to start the season. Not only that, EJ, they are the only undefeated team in the NFL. What has stood out most to you about this team through the first 3 weeks?
Well, obviously the defense has played really well, and you can see some schematic adjustments that have really worked for the group, especially now that there's more talent on that side of the ball. But I think it's got to be Jalen Hurts. I mean, the way that he's played this season is a marked improvement from last year. Through 3 games, he's answered a lot of questions about whether he's the long-term answer at the position. We'll talk about this particular game and what we might learn about Jalen Hurts this afternoon, but no matter what, this guy has already proven that he's taken some significant steps. So yeah, I think it's Jalen Hurts' play has been kind of the story here. I mean, against Washington, you kind of saw AJ Brown and Devontae Smith make the big plays, but Jalen Hurts is the one kind of getting him into those plays. I wrote about that this week. He's got a lot more command at the line of scrimmage. He's able to make checks at the line to get them into the right looks, and he's reading defenses at a high level right now. So, yeah, I would say Jalen Hurts is pretty much. I would say he's the one that's kind of surprised me. I expected the defense to take some steps forward, but I didn't know what we were going to get from Jalen Hurts, and so far it's been excellent.
Let's stick right there at the quarterback position, EJ, as I speak over the PA announcer here. Again, we are coming to you from the press box at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. EJ, Jalen Hurts was named the NFC Offensive Player of the Month. That's obviously a testament to his performance through the first 3 games. EJ, what stood out to me the most is that there have been multiple instances where he's got it done in different ways. We saw in the first week, he had to rush a lot, had to escape the pocket, make plays with his feet. Over the past 2 games, we've seen him make plays not only on the run, on his feet, but also from the pocket. And honestly, that's probably the biggest thing to me is his pocket presence, his mechanics. They seem much improved. He spoke so much about it throughout the offseason about all the work he had put in, but it feels like we're actually seeing it, albeit a small sample size throughout the first month.
Yeah, I mean, and it's been against different defensive schemes. The Lions were man heavy, blitz heavy, and that was kind of why he was able to kind of get out of the pocket and get big gains with his legs. Is because when you're man coverage defensive backs, their backs are turned to the quarterback. You got to keep an eye on Jalen Hurts, otherwise he can escape the pocket and do damage with his legs. Against the Vikings, it was a completely different look. It was a zone coverage team, played on a soft shell, played off coverage, and Jalen Hurts was successful against them. The Commanders kind of mixed it up a little bit more, I would say, and he was successful against them too. So, like I said, I don't want to get ahead of myself. This week will be a really good test. We'll see how he looks against a Todd Bowles disciple, a team that kind of runs some of the stuff that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had so much success against him with. But yeah, I mean, he's answered, like I said, he's answered a lot of questions this season. So.
EJ, let's stick right there with the awards type theme. It wasn't only Jalen Hurts who was recognized earlier in the week, but Brandon Graham, the 13-year veteran defensive end. He is the longest tenured athlete in the city of Philadelphia. For the first time in his 13-year career, he was named Defensive Player of the Week. EJ, I believe he had 2.5 sacks last week against former quarterback Carson Wentz. The Eagles now have 12 sacks, which is crazy to see, but they're second in the NFL now, thanks to that 9-sack performance. EJ, obviously with good performance, the Eagles are undefeated again. They're going to get these accolades, but kind of surprising that it took this long for BG to get his first POW.
Yeah, well, I wrote a story about BG in the preseason, and he said that he's got to make sure that Fletcher Cox doesn't catch up to his sack total. He wants to keep that record above Fletch. So, yeah, I think that he probably saw Fletcher get a couple and said, "All right, let me get in the action here." But no, I mean, it was. I think he started the season maybe a little rusty, but I think we kind of saw him knock off that rust and have a productive day against Washington. I mean, he's still playing at a pretty high level, and I think what he offers to the defensive front is valuable. He can play a lot of different spots, and he's just a good, he's the type of veteran that you want in the room. He's the type of guy who teaches the younger guys. He sort of always says, like, I don't know how long I can play because these guys are going to be coming for my job. These guys are all improving quickly, and yeah, I mean, I think that his presence is definitely felt in that defensive front.
Certainly, it was the third consecutive week. The first week it was Zach McPherson getting Special Teams Player of the Week. The second week it was Darius Slay, Defensive Player of the Week. Third week, Brandon Graham, and then obviously, like what we mentioned, Jalen Hurts receiving the Offensive Player of the Month. EJ, let's transition over to who's hurt and who's healthy. We had kind of joked about how the team had such great health throughout the first 3 weeks. Here we are, and they're finally facing some hurdles in regards to injuries. Can you recap here? Who are the two main starters who will be out, or contributors rather?
Yeah, so Avante Maddox is definitely the big one. The Eagles will be without their starting slot cornerback today. There's a couple of ways that they can kind of insulate that loss, but none of them are ideal, especially against a Jacksonville Jaguars team that Christian Kirk operates a lot out of the slot. The majority of his snaps come out of the slot, and he's been really productive for this team. So, we can talk about the ways that they might be able to cover for that loss in a second. But Boston Scott's also out, and I have the inactives up here. Ian Book's down. Reed Blankenship is down. Janarius Robinson is down, and Josh Sills is down. And on Jacksonville side, I didn't see all of them, but I saw that Zay Jones is out. So yeah, it's I guess it's the Eagles secondary is banged up, Jaguars wide receiving core is banged up, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they can kind of compensate for those losses.
In addition to Avante Maddox being down, the team elevated veteran defensive back Andre Chachere. Again, we will
Good job.
speak, I guess, in a little bit about how they can replace Avante Maddox there in the slot. But EJ, there was one more transaction that was added yesterday. We can't forget him, Britton Covey. You wrote a lot about him throughout the training camp early in the summer. Uh, we're 3 games in, EJ, and Britton has yet to break off for a big return. What kind of needs to happen for him to really make an impact here on special teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just going to be with more time. He might be getting more confident, but I do think that today the number one priority is do not drop the ball on those punt returns. It's a wet day, it's a windy day. We saw him have the one muffed punt against Washington, where they kind of said, "Oh, there's a really big gust of wind right before the play," but there's going to be big gusts of wind all day today. I think the ball security is going to be important, and yeah, I mean, I don't really pretend to know all the intricate details of punt return blocking and the schematic side of it, but I do know that like sometimes Britton has talked to me about like the field side having to go one way or the other. So I'm sure they'll probably try and get that stuff ironed out. But I think today the number one thing is going to be ball security.
All right, EJ, we've talked about Britton Covey. You mentioned Boston Scott. Obviously, he is on the depth chart behind Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell. Trey Sermon might make his Eagles debut here today with Boston being out. But the big loss today, EJ, you mentioned it earlier. It is Avante Maddox, the starting slot cornerback for the Eagles. There are several ways, EJ, that they might be able to replace his reps today. I'll mention one of them, CD Gardner Johnson. CD's kind of his nickname. He likes to go by CG, CJ, CD, whatever you have it. But Gardner Johnson, a lot of his reps with the Saints, his former team, came from exclusively at the nickel position where he had a lot of success. That's a big reason why the Eagles went ahead and pursued him. They saw a lot of versatility in his game. He's been playing safety with Marcus Epps these past 3 games. Could you see the team doing that, EJ? Do you see maybe seeing Josiah Scott there? What are your expectations? Maybe Zach McPherson. What do you predict at slot cornerback today?
Yeah, I mean, CJ Gardner Johnson has more experience playing slot corner than he does at safety, honestly. So I could see that for sure. If he goes down to the slot, then you'd either have Andre Sachere, Kayvon Wallace, or, Josiah Scott even has a little bit of safety experience. I would have put Reed Blankenship in that group of possibilities on the back end before he was listed as an active. I mean, Kayvon Wallace is like the 6 DB in the dime packages. So it kind of tells you that he's probably the next guy up at safety. So if they do that, you expect to see Kayvon back there, I guess. If their other option, like you mentioned, they could put Zach McPherson in the slot. He has experience playing in college. They could put McPherson on the outside and have Darius Slay in the slot. That makes sense for this matchup because Christian Kirk plays in the slot so often. You just put your best corner on their best wide receiver, and you just have McPherson on the outside. He's got experience playing on the outside, and I think that could be a good matchup dependent thing. Maybe you see that on third downs and man coverage. And the other option is, yeah, you put Josiah Scott in the slot, you leave everybody else alone, and you say, "Good luck, Josiah." So, yeah, they definitely have some options. Maybe they'll mix it up. They could do one or two of these options. They could do three of them. So, yeah, I do think that that was a big thing going into the offseason was, or coming into their training camp was the versatility that the secondary had. And, when they added CJ Gardner Johnson, it was, even more versatility, guys who can play different positions, guys who can line up in multiple alignments. And yeah, this is kind of the benefit. This is how they benefit from that, is being able to, kind of insulate a loss like Avante Maddox, who kind of, he popped up on the injury report later in the week with the ankle thing, aggravated on Thursday, was held on Friday. So yeah, I do think that, like I said, they have the versatility to sort of figure it out, but it is definitely going to complicate things, especially against a team like the Jags, who has a dominant slot receiver.
Yeah, and since really EJ Avante Maddox signed his extension last season, in my opinion, he's played very, very well.
Yeah,
Specifically, these past 3 games, he's been a very sure tackler. We saw in the Vikings game specifically how he was bringing down guys like Justin Jefferson in the middle open parts of the field, and obviously he had a big interception that game. Nick Sirianni had a shirt, a
yeah.
photo of that picture just the other day. So again, a big loss there with Avante Maddox. We will see how the Eagles adjust. EJ, it is time to move on to our favorite segment. It is called What You Said. A reminder to all of our viewers back home that you can submit your questions and comments all throughout the week and the game. And who knows, next week we will be in Arizona and we might have a chance to read them off during next week's show. EJ, our first one comes from Cooper Mann, who says the Eagles are ripe for an upset. This is such a Philadelphia fan comment. After all, it's a Philly team. What else can you expect? EJ, it is the NFL. A lot of you can never count any team out is kind of like what coaches enjoy to say. And also, the weather is going to play a factor in today's game. Again, it's been raining all morning. Could you see an upset? I don't want to prelude too much to your prediction for later, but anything is possible, especially with Doug Peterson making his return.
Well, listen, let's just spoiler alert. I picked the Jaguars this week, and there have been two. We have to, to bring you guys behind the curtain a little bit. We have to scour through the comments to find, questions for the show. And there have been two types of commenters this week. Commenters who cannot believe that I would pick the Jaguars. How dare I pick the team that, the Jaguars? They're the Jaguars. They lost to the Commanders. How dare I pick? How dare I pick Jacksonville in this game? And then there are commenters who are like this guy, who are like, oh my gosh, the Eagles are riding way too high. There's going to be an upset. They're ripe for an upset. So, I mean, I get a kick out of that. That's why I made sure to include kind of both perspectives, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think that this Jaguars team is really talented. It's not the Jaguars team from last year for sure. Doug Pederson was a major upgrade at the coaching ranks. Trevor Lawrence has taken a step. There's a lot of talent on this team. And you've seen that the last 2 weeks. I mean, they scored 38 points against a talented Chargers defense, and they had 3 red zone field goals. They left a lot on the table. So, yeah, I do think that this will be a close game. The weather is kind of the great equalizer, especially the Jaguars' run defense is one of the best in the league so far. And, when the weather's like this, you kind of want to be able to lean on your run game and kind of control the ball a little bit more. So, I do think this is going to be a good game. I think the weather will have an impact. And, yeah, I mean, I guess it's perceived as an upset because the Eagles are favorites, but I expected this game to be close even before the weather became such a big factor.
And also another note, you mentioned Doug Peterson, you mentioned Trevor Lawrence, his chemistry and him taking a step. Running back James Robinson also has 4 touchdowns in 3 games after coming off a torn Achilles injury. EJ, a lot of weapons there for Trevor Lawrence today. Our next comment comes from 1995 DH, who says, ugly rainy weather makes for the unexpected. Will Miles Sanders fumble a slippery ball? Who knows what misfortune goes on in this one? EJ, since he mentioned Miles Sanders, our commenter, uh, let's stick there in the running game. Obviously, we mentioned Boston Scott will be out, but this Jaguars defense is no slouch, EJ. The last I checked, I think they were top 2 or maybe even the best rushing defense in the National Football League. They are flying into the backfield, into the flats. You and I both watched their game from last week, and they stopped what many expected to be an explosive Chargers offense.
Yeah, no, they've got some talented guys up front. Obviously, people talk about Trayvon Walker, Jonathan Allen, a guy that a lot of Eagles fans are familiar with. They definitely have some talent up front, and Devin Lloyd, the first round pick out of Utah. I mean, he's exactly the type of linebacker that you worry about when you have a zone read quarterback. I mean, we talked about how Jaguars defensive coordinator Mike Caldwell comes from the Todd Bowles coaching tree. And he's, I mean, if any team, if any coach is going to have like a game plan that is well set up to contain Jalen Hurts and kind of dare him to do the things that he's not necessarily good at, it's a guy who was on the Tampa Bay staff last year. I mean, we saw that wild card playoff game against the Bucks. I think that you can't throw out whatever happens from the first three games if Jalen Hurts struggles today, but I definitely think that this is a huge test to see if he's taken the steps necessary to kind of combat what the Bucks did to him and what the Jaguars will probably do to him today. I mean, they're going to challenge him to throw to the deep middle of the field. They're going to challenge the wide receivers to win their one-on-one matchups. Eagles are better suited than they were last year in that area, obviously because AJ Brown's here now and Devontae Smith has kind of taken that next step. But yeah, I do think that this is going to be an important test for Jalen Hurts as a passer and as a runner. With a guy like Devin Lloyd who can kind of chase you around the field and close those gaps a lot faster, I do think that schematically and talent wise, this is about as big of a test for Jalen Hurts as he's had in the first 3 weeks. So that's again, I mean, I just think like that this is going to be the way the season goes, right? You're going to have these big tests. You're going to have, matchups that you want to get the information from. It's a long season and you can gather information from each game. This is definitely one of the bigger ones so far.
All right, EJ, we have a couple more comments. Appreciate the insight there. This next one comes from Slowfoot, excuse me, who says the Eagles have not played a good team yet. I'm not saying the Jaguars are a good team, but this game worries me. EJ, we've kind of prefaced this comment with all of our opinions on this Jaguars team, how much improved they are. EJ, the Eagles, they didn't make their schedule, but they are benefiting again from this softer schedule to begin the season. They will not face a playoff opponent from last year until next week when they travel to the Arizona Cardinals. I wouldn't necessarily agree with this comment, EJ. I do think the Vikings are a better team than an average fan might expect them to be, or their expectations of the Vikings. Because we saw what the Vikings did the week previously against the Packers. So just a lot going on here early on in the season, and it seems that the Eagles are taking advantage of it here, sitting at 3-0.
Yeah, I think that this Vikings team is a decent team, or not this. Sorry, I think the Vikings are a decent team. I think the Lions are a decent team. It is. You're right. It's just the way the schedule worked out. And credit to the Eagles for taking advantage of it, winning the games that they need to win early in the season, because it is going to get harder as we progress here. So, I mean, you can't fault them for that. I think this Jaguars team has a lot of talent, and I mean, listen, again, I picked Jacksonville to win. So if they win, I'm not. If the Eagles beat Jacksonville, I'm not going to sit here and go, "Oh, well, Jacksonville stunk." I'll give them credit. It's a good team with a good coach. So yeah, I do think, like I said, like there's going to be further tests down the road with better teams, but that's what the league is. What's the boxing term? Like styles make fights. You're going to have some teams that maybe match up well against you, maybe teams that don't match up as well. I think that this is a challenging matchup for the Eagles.
All right, EJ. Our last comment comes from Dolores. It is a fun one. They say, "I wonder if Doug Pederson will run the Philly special." EJ, the Philly special, obviously a memorable play in franchise history. I don't necessarily know if Doug will execute the Philly special, but I would not be surprised if he did have a trick play up his sleeve. What do you think?
Yeah, I think now the weather kind of makes that more complicated, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see something interesting, some kind of out there play call from Doug. I mean, that's kind of what we came to expect from him while he was here. So probably not the Philly special, but I thought that was like a fun comment for sure. It would be something, that's for sure.
All right, EJ, it is time to transition over to tweet of the week. Before we pull it up, I want to ask you, EJ, do you like ice cream, man?
Yeah, I think I like it a little too much sometimes, so I gotta make sure I try to stay away from it. But yeah, I mean, I worked at an ice cream shop when I was in high school. That's where I met my wife. So yeah, I got a lot of things to thank ice cream for. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so EJ likes ice cream. We know Doug Pederson likes ice cream. Our tweet of the week. The Eagles just ran out this new promotion with Wendy's. It might look familiar if you go to a Sixers game. For the Eagles version, if the team does not allow the opposing team to score a touchdown in the first quarter, all Eagles fans across the tri-state area will win a free Frosty. EJ, are you a fan of the Frosty freeze out?
Yes. So I am definitely a fan of it during Sixers games. I think it's a good promotional idea. It might bring out, as we've seen with Sixers fans, it might bring out some intensity and vitriol from Eagles fans at times. Desperate for the free frosty. But yeah, no. The only thing I will say about it is like whenever I go to a Sixers game and they achieve the frosty freeze out, it's not like I ever remember to get the frosty the next day. So I hope that that Eagles fans will be better than I was when I'm always like I always completely forget to get the Wendy's the next day and get the free frosty, and they're like $1 anyway. So I don't know, whatever.
And based on the past month, EJ, out of the three games, the Eagles have not allowed the opponent to score a touchdown in two of those three games. So
Yeah,
we'll see if that momentum carries over here today in the first quarter. Again, Doug Pederson, a big fan of ice cream. We'll see if the Eagles are able to limit the Jaguars from scoring in the first quarter. It is prediction time, EJ. But first, let's throw it back to last week. You were absolutely money when I asked you who you thought was going to be the big game pick.
just
Let's
I
roll
want to
the
get
video.
this out there so that I can point back to it at the end of the game. I think Devontae Smith has a big game today. I think the Commanders have struggled against slot receivers this year, and I predicted Devontae would have a big game against the Lions, and he had no catches. So that's good work by me. But yeah, I think I'm doubling down on it this week. I think he's gonna have a big game. I think he's gonna have a lot of success operating out of the slot with like choice routes, just taking advantage of the way that Washington plays defense. Like I said earlier, that Amon-Ra St. Brown. And before that, Christian Kirk had a lot of success out of the slot against this team. So if you needed some last minute fantasy advice for our viewers then there you go. So yeah, I got Eagles 31-21 with Devontae Smith having a big game.
And there you have it, EJ. Devontae Smith, he had a career high in receiving yards, career high in catches last week against the Commanders. Now I've got to ask you, who's are you picking today to have that big game?
Give me one of the other Batman. How about that? How about we take AJ Brown today? This is the type of game I feel like a guy like AJ Brown can. I don't know if anybody loves playing in the rain, but I could see AJ Brown being the type of guy that can kind of thrive in these conditions. He's a big physical guy, already tough to tackle. Now you add the elements into that. I think he might be the one to have a big day today, especially as I mentioned earlier. I think Jacksonville will probably kind of dare Jalen Hurts and the wide receivers to win one-on-one matchups and kind of sit in the pocket a little bit longer, let routes develop. I think AJ Brown's the type of guy we see it. Sometimes it's just like let's hit the easy button. Let's throw a slant to AJ Brown 10 yards down the field and let him create. So, yeah, obviously you guys are going to have to listen to me for the rest of the season, talk about the one time that I was right. We're not going to talk about when I predicted that Devontae Smith would have a big game against the Lions and he had no catches. Yeah, give me AJ Brown this week.
I am going to take a couple of role players. Let's see Quez Watkins get a touchdown. We've seen what he can do in blowing off the top parts of the defense. And Kenny Gainwell, EJ, I think I'd like Kenny to have a big game today, more so from a receiving aspect. We know how good the Jaguars are at stopping the run in those situational type scenarios, the 2 minute, the goal line packages. Kenny is the team's featured running back in those instances. I think he gets a touchdown today. So give me Kenny Gainwell or Quez Watkins for a big game. Prediction time, prediction time, prediction time. EJ, give me your score. You kind of mentioned it earlier. What did you put in today's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer?
So I think I had 34-31 Jaguars in the Inquirer today. With the weather, again, it's literally raining sideways right now. I think it might be a lower scoring game, but I still would pick the Jags. I think the weather, if anything, plays into the Jags' favor as a really good run defense. Like we said, it's kind of the great equalizer as far as talent advantages go. It kind of changes the dynamics of the game. So if I had to go with a score, if I could revise, you can't revise what's in the newspaper, obviously, it's printed already. But if I could revise it based off of the weather, I'd maybe go Jags 24, Eagles 21. I think that this game will be close going into the fourth quarter. I could see things like the Eagles' second half scoring troubles and the kind of the reliance on explosive plays. Listen, it's explosive plays are what they go for. It's not like that's a bad thing, but I think their reliance on them, it could be sporadic. I could see them kind of regressing to the mean this game. So, yeah, I think that the Eagles might leave the link today with a little bit of a wake up call. I don't think that the season's over. I don't think that the world is world is burning if they lose this game. I think it's going to be a close one. I think the Jaguars pull it out.
EJ goes with the Jaguars. I am sticking with the Eagles. I think they win by a touchdown. here today in Philadelphia. Give me again Quez Watkins and Kenny Gainwell for a big game. Doug Pederson, he was part of the staff that drafted Jalen Hurts. You mentioned the defensive coordinator, knowing Jalen Hurts' tendencies. I think just when we assess Hurts' game through these first 3 weeks, he's a much improved player from what we saw down there in Tampa Bay. EJ, it is time to wrap up. It is almost kickoff time. I want to thank all of our viewers for tuning in to Inquire Live at Game Day Central. Make sure you stick around at inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. From there, you'll be able to chat with myself, EJ Smith, Jeff McClain, and our columnists Mike Sealski and Marcus Hayes. We are all here on site, ready to cover these Eagles and Jaguars. Who knows? Maybe next time your comments might show up on Inquire Live at Game Day Central. EJ, is it ice cream time?
No, it's not ice cream time this early in the day. Maybe after the game. Yeah.
That was a nod again to Doug Pederson, who the Eagles will be welcoming here back today at Lincoln Financial Field. For EJ Smith, I am Josh Tolentino. Thank you so much for tuning in to Game Day Central. We will see you next week in Arizona, and we will see if the Eagles are still undefeated as they enter week 5. Thanks for tuning in.